Hello everyone, welcome back to Technical Writing. So today we're actually going to talk about what technical communication is and what the work technical communicators actually do is. So again, what are the work patterns of technical communicators? Well, very quickly, very succinctly, they're translators. So when I work as a technical communicator, I am serving as the bridge between designers or engineers, or who I more commonly work with, and the users of a product or a design. So technical communicators bridge the gap between experts who have expert knowledge of how to design and engineer products and how those products work, and users who may not necessarily have the same know-how. Now then, other than the very quick overview I just gave of what technical communicators do, I'm also going to cover three broad goals of technical communicators and the work they do. So, the first job a technical communicator has is to be an information designer. So we take a product or we take information and we think about, how do I deliver this to a user in the most effective, usable, user-centered way? That's quite a difficult question, admittedly, and that's something we're going to explore how to do this summer. Okay, so let's start with a quick example here. Now then, this is an actual car dashboard. There are 64 possible icons that could appear in this car. Now, in my experience as a technical communicator, an engineer might look at this and say, these are 64 things that could possibly go wrong with this car, and someone driving this car needs to have these options available and they need to know what these mean. I agree with that. Okay, cars are complicated and many things can go wrong. Many things that can go wrong with cars are actually quite dangerous, if not life-threatening. Not to underplay that at all. However, as a technical communicator and as an information designer, I look at this and I say, wow, no user is going to take the time to figure out what all 64 of these icons mean. It's just not going to happen. So even if, as a tech writer, I write a car user manual that details what all 64 of these icons mean, let's be real here, how many of us actually crack open our user manuals? Perhaps you all are more on top of things than I am, but I can't remember the last time I actually opened my car user manual. So in this instance, an engineer would then come back and say, well, what do we do with that? And a technical communicator would respond with the question, well, what's the most urgent icon that could appear? And then it would be, give me a list of the most urgent icons that could come up. Now then, urgent could mean lights that come on the most frequently, or urgent could mean if this light comes on, you need to do something about it immediately. And you need to foreground those urgent icons. So pretty much, you're not trying to give your users every possible bit of information, because that's overwhelming. And I ask you all, how often is it necessary for the user of a product to know every single facet of the product? That's pretty rare. So you have to think about the need to know information. What's the most important information? What's the most potentially dangerous thing that could happen with a product? Or what are the dangers? So importance, dangers. Those are what you emphasize. Okay, the next thing that technical communication emphasizes is user advocacy. So, advocacy is quite a strong word, and you may be wondering, why would we use that word in this phrase? Well, user advocacy is meant to be quite a strong thing. So again, as I said, technical communicators are meant to bridge the gap between designers and engineers and users. So from an engineering perspective, and by the way, I'm going to use engineering examples a lot in this course. I apologize about that ahead of time. From an engineering perspective, you're probably looking at a product you're engineering and thinking about the function of it. So does it work as it's supposed to work? Is it reliable? Is it accurate? And at that point, once you've hit the two big ones, which is functionality and reliability, is it usable? So can it be used with hopefully minimal difficulty? Those are three good things. However, as a user advocate, a technical communicator is going to come back and say users aren't going to use a product just because it's functional. We don't use things just because there are things there to be used. Think about why you use things. Okay, so think about when you're on your computer and you're trying to search something. Are you going to go to Bing? Are you going to go to Yahoo? Are you going to go to Ask Jeeves, for those of you that remember that one? Or are you going to go to Google? So why do you use Google versus other search engines? Okay, those of you that stream, I'm a big Netflix fan versus Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO Go is the worst. So those of you who also prefer Netflix, or if you prefer Hulu to others, or Amazon Prime to others, why do you go with the streaming service you go with? Probably you're getting into convenience, you're getting into the pleasurability, and you're getting into meaning. So some sort of personal significance. So with user advocacy, we're focusing on experience. So the user experience of a product. Designer-centered thinking focuses on the task and whether the product that's being engineered can successfully complete task. That is a great stepping stone, but I encourage all of you, especially future engineers, you can't stop there. You really have to focus on, okay, I've developed a product, it does what it's supposed to do, now then how will users actually use this product? Because if there's a discrepancy between what the product's doing and how users will actually use it, that's something you've got to address. Okay, so user-centered communication is how we really go about user advocacy in the tech comm world. So you're thinking about how to take important information or difficult to understand information and deliver it in a way that it's intuitive for users. Okay, so let's look at these. So here we have examples of some things that are user-centered design-wise and things that definitely aren't. So let's start at the top left with the light switches here. We're all probably fairly familiar with a light switch panel like this. They're terrible. They're absolutely terrible because the only way for you to effectively use these light switches in a user-centered kind of way is to go through the trial and error of flipping through every switch so often that you figure out which switch goes to what room. Okay, now let's look at the light panel below this. Much more user-centered. And why is that? Because let's say this is an office, the light switch panel that controls an office space. If I only want the light to the main office space with all the desks and the cubicles to be on, as a user, I can figure out exactly what I need to push much more quickly than I can with the light switch above it. Now then, let's go over to the door handles here. Okay, this might be a controversial opinion, but I'm going to say when it comes to door handles, users are going to look at a handle jutting out and assume that they have to pull it. Disagree with me if you want on that, but I'm going to say if we see something, we grip, we pull. I'm going to stand by that. Now then, push doors. Those are usually things we feel like we have to lean into, right? Because you're having to push the door away from you. So why would you have a handle jutting out, grab the handle, and then push it away from you? Doesn't make a lot of sense when you really think about it. Okay, just for fun, these phones down here. Some of you, like I, may have had to have used these phones in the past when you started working. They're the worst, they're difficult to use, and I don't know about you, but when I first started working retail and had to use this type of phone, I hung up on many a customer. So, not user-centered here. Okay, so medicine bottles are a really good example of when user-centered design goes from convenience to actually being important to the user's well-being. Okay, so let's look at these medicine bottles. The labeling's inconsistent, it's really cluttered, it's confusing. As users, we would have to stare at these medicine bottles for a little bit to figure out the information we need to know. It's not good, especially if you're in a multi-member household and you all have medicines you're taking. This could very quickly become a bad situation. So, at one point, Target Pharmacy actually developed this prototype of a medicine bottle. Now then, let's look at this. Number one, notice how much clutter has been eliminated. Okay, and now I'm going to use these Target bottles to introduce two terms you're going to hear a lot this unit. The first is scannability, which is pretty self-explanatory. Okay, scannability means as a user, we can look at the front and back of this medicine bottle in a few seconds and get the most important information, which would be what the medicine actually is, the dosage, and the instructions. Okay, then on the back of the bottle, we have the warnings. Always very important to highlight. So that's scannability. What this bottle also does, and what also goes along with scannability, is create vectors. Okay, so vectors, not talking about math here, sorry. Vectors are things we do with textual design to create a hierarchy of importance. Okay, so for instance here, on this medicine bottle, amoxicillin is bolded. It's in all caps. It's highlighted in blue. It's at the top of the bottle. Target Pharmacy really wants you to pay attention first and foremost to the medication and the dosage. So that is a really important vector. That is the most important part of this medicine bottle. It's not Dr. Smith, it's not the RX, it's not Target's phone number, it's what the medicine actually is. That makes sense, right? Absolutely. Okay, let's move on. So the last thing we're going to talk about right now is how technical communicators are stewards of writing activity in organization. Probably goes without saying, but a technical communicator covers all aspects of communication. Usually that is writing-based activity. So let's move on from that. Why scannability? Okay, so I just introduced scannability. You may be wondering, but why does that matter? Well, let's take a resume, for example. Someone is only going to give you about 5 to 10 seconds of their time with your resume. They're not going to stare at your resume for a full minute to 2 minutes. You have seconds. So scannability, also things like vectors and creating a hierarchy of importance, is essential. Okay, so if you have a resume, you need your education and you need your work experience to stand out first and foremost. That's what you need a potential interviewer to pay attention to in the 5 to 10 seconds they have you. So, scannability is where that comes in. You put the most important information first. You put one idea per paragraph. No info dumps. No info dumps. Be concise. You use headings, you use bullets, you use image captions, useful links, and you use actual numerals. You won't write out your numbers, you will use actual numerals. So things like that are just going to maximize, again, going back to the resume example, the 5 to 10 seconds you have to get someone to put your resume in a yes pile and actually read your cover letter and hopefully call you in for an interview. Speaking of resumes, let's look at these two. So, Derek and Susan. Derek's resume, someone would actually give 5 to 10 seconds. I'm going to be honest with you. Susan, I would look at this resume, and I'm going to say most interviewers would, and immediately discard this. I am not going to try to read everything Susan is trying to tell me on this page. It's an info dump. It's way too much information. I cannot scan it. And I have no idea what Susan is actually trying to highlight here. And frankly, I don't know that Susan knows what she's trying to highlight. So she's just putting everything she possibly can. Don't make that mistake. Okay, that's going to get your resume discarded very quickly. And also notice this is page 2 of Susan's resume, and she's pulling this nonsense. Not good, Susan. Derek, meanwhile, it's a 1-page resume, which is great. You want your resume to either be 1 full page or 2 full pages, not multiple pages. Okay, that's a CV. And Derek is hitting the very first thing that you want to think about when you're designing a technical document, and that's visual appeal. I know that's not awesome and it's not great to think about, but the reality is we pay more attention to documents that draw us in visually than like Susan over here, who is likely just as qualified as Derek, if not more so, but we're not drawn to the design and we're not going to actually get in and see what Susan has to offer. Derek, we likely would, okay? Now then, having said that, when I actually get into Derek's resume, it's not perfect. It's not even passable, really. However, he has a good template going. So he has an eye-catching template. His name stands out. His contact information stands out. So the most important things stand out first. But in the next video, when we actually start talking about resumes, I will go into more detail on what the content of a resume should actually look like. Okay, so here's some more information on scannability. So think about reading patterns with scannability as well as creating vectors. Divide your page. So let's look at this Google results page right here. Whenever you have a page and you're thinking, how do I create vectors? How do I make something scannable? Take the space you have, divide it into 4 quads. Okay, you want to balance your quadrants here. So you want the same amount of text, white space, and images in each quadrant. That's going to help with scannability. And as far as creating a hierarchy of importance through vectors, think about things you can do with font and design of text. So if it's a resume, you want your section headings to stand out. You want to bold them, you want to underline them. You want to do stuff like that. Maybe you italicize certain things. So perhaps you have a certain job title where you work. Maybe you italicize that, especially if it's an actual title. That's something that you want to stick out. Maybe you bullet your duties so someone can't scan through those. Things like that are how you create vectors. And don't worry, we'll go into more detail on that. So this infographic, a great example of something that's scannable, creates balanced vectors. Our quadrants are balanced, all good stuff there. And this image, another example of really quadrants, balancing your quadrants. Now then, the top left quadrant is a little blank, but mostly you've got pretty good quadrant space here. Okay, so this video, I was just really introducing the theory behind technical communication. This was a very quick overview. Do not worry if you are a little unsure at the end of this video of what's going on. In the next video, we're actually going to apply the things I talked about in this video to resumes, then we'll apply to cover letters. And by the end of this summer, a lot of the terms I threw out in this video are going to be second nature to you. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.